Hi there, I'm Caril. 3 years ago, I moved away, and my mom didn't even notice. Now, after all this time, she's suddenly begging me to come back for a wedding I wasn't even asked about. How did it get this bad? How do you forgive a family that only remembers you when they need something? Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I would really love to hear your story. The ringtone shattered the quiet hum of my Sunday morning. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the name blinking back at me like some ghost I thought I'd buried years ago. Mom. I hadn't heard from her in 3 years? Maybe more if you didn't count the obligatory, half-hearted Christmas texts. I let it ring. And ring. Only when it clicked over to voicemail did I breathe again. Curiosity, that old stubborn ache, gnawed at me. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, bright, cheery, completely detached from the years of silence. Hey, honey, big news. Dorian's getting married. We would love for you to come back home, you know. For the family, everyone's asking about you. As if I had just stepped out for milk and forgotten to come back. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling the world tilt just slightly. The nerve it took to act like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't watched me pack my life into a battered Toyota and vanish without a word, because staying had started to feel like suffocating. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the voicemail still playing in loops. Her voice, that fake sweetness, wrapped around me like barbed wire. Outside my window, Portland was dressed in its usual gray mist. 3 years in this city had reshaped me. I had built a small life, modest but mine. No borrowed dreams, no backhanded compliments, just me. A coffee shop job that paid the bills, and the stubborn peace of knowing I didn't owe anyone anything. I remembered those first months, sleeping on a lumpy mattress on the floor, counting coins to afford instant noodles, celebrating tiny victories like getting my own library card. No family dinners, no proud applause, just silence, and a freedom so raw it almost scared me. I thought I had made peace with it. I thought the ache of being forgotten had dulled into something manageable. But hearing her voice, pretending nothing had ever happened, peeled the scar right open. Later that day, an old neighbor, Mrs. Collins, sent me a cheerful message through Facebook. Excited to see you at Dorian's wedding. Your mom said you're definitely coming. I reread the message 3 times, my jaw tightening with each pass. Nobody had asked me, not once. It was already decided. I was an accessory, a piece of the perfect family tableau they wanted to present. Whether I had healed, whether I had moved on, whether I even wanted to be part of their charade, that didn't matter. I let the phone fall onto the couch beside me. Portland rain drummed against the window, steady and cold. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that served a purpose. As I stared out into the misty streets, a slow-burning anger started to bloom in my chest, sharp and quiet. I deleted the voicemail without replying. I sat there, breathing in the damp city air, letting the tension coil tight inside me. I knew then, if I returned, it wouldn't be for me. It would be for them. The sun barely broke through the Portland fog when my phone buzzed again, a reminder I hadn't asked for. A forwarded message, innocuous at first glance, sat in my inbox like a ticking bomb. It was from a family friend, meant for me by accident. Curiosity, or maybe old habits, got the better of me. I opened it. It was a forwarded conversation between my mother and the bride's family, paragraph after paragraph painting me in strokes so bright they barely resembled reality. In her words, I was the golden sister, the pride of the family, the perfect example they couldn't wait to show off at the wedding. Perfect. As if my silence, my distance, my absence for years had simply been edited out. My stomach twisted. I wasn't a daughter to them, I was a prop. A shiny object to polish and parade when it suited them, never mind the years spent pretending I didn't exist. I closed the message without replying, my fingers cold despite the warm coffee cradled in my hands. Later that afternoon, while sorting through old emails for work, I noticed something odd. An alert from my old savings account. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't touched that account in years, but the details were chillingly clear. A large withdrawal. Days ago, confused, I called the bank, and just like that, the last shreds of doubt evaporated. Dorian had accessed my account, moved money, and used it to buy an engagement ring, the bank clerk told me cheerfully, oblivious to the stones settling in my chest. When I confronted my parents, it was like stepping into a play where everyone else had memorized their lines but me. "Family sacrifices, Caril," my mother said, almost bored. "You have so much. Why are you being selfish?" Orville didn't even look up from his newspaper. "We raised you better than this whining." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them and ask when exactly my life became their property, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there, arms at my sides, feeling something important crack quietly inside me. Not anger, something colder, something quieter. A small part of me, the part that used to beg for scraps of their attention, died in that living room. Later that night, I sat at my desk, the same battered one I'd bought secondhand when I first moved here, and stared at the blinking voicemail light on my phone. I opened my laptop instead, pulled up my account records, and documented everything: transactions, dates, amounts. I didn't know yet what I would do with it. I just knew I needed proof, needed anchors in a sea where truth had always been whatever they decided it was. The suitcase I had packed weeks ago sat by the door, still unopened. Portland wasn't just my city now. It was my home, my choice. I pressed delete on the new voicemail without even listening. I would not let them write my story this time. I confronted them the next evening, sitting stiffly at the kitchen table while they carried on like it was just another ordinary day. The faded floral tablecloth, the humming of the old fridge, the scent of burnt coffee lingering in the air, everything felt trapped in time except me. "I saw the transaction," I said quietly, voice sharper than I intended. "The savings account, my account." Brenda barely blinked. Orville sighed as if I had interrupted some important thought. "You weren't using it," he said, his tone dismissive. "Dorian needed help. Family helps family, Caril." Brenda chimed in. "You left us, remember? You left your brother behind to pick up the pieces. What did you expect us to do?" Their words hit like tiny, well-aimed stones, precise in how they reopened wounds I thought had long since scarred over. The world tilted, just slightly, as the gravity of their betrayal pressed down on me. Not only had they stolen from me, they blamed me for forcing them to do it. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. Instead, I sat there, silent, the humiliation and anger tangling up in my chest until they felt indistinguishable. That night, my phone rang again. Brenda this time. Her voice was shaking, the kind of trembling you recognize not from true fear but from manufactured panic. "It's Dorian," she said, gasping. He's not well. Caril, please, he needs you." For a second, my heart lurched the way it always had whenever she needed me. The little girl in me, the one who still dreamed of being enough for them, wanted to believe. But a colder, newer part of me, one forged in the lonely nights and silent victories of Portland, hesitated. "What's wrong with him?" I asked, tone flatter than I'd intended. She wavered, stammered something about stress and doctors, without offering a single concrete detail. I knew better. I hung up gently before her words could weave their old magic and bind me again. The next morning, I found myself wandering the damp streets of downtown Portland, my hands deep in my coat pockets. The mist clung to everything, softening the city's sharp edges, blurring the people passing by. Each footstep brought back old memories. My high school graduation they forgot to attend, the birthday cards that never came, the job offers they brushed off because they didn't really understand what it was you do anyway. Had they ever truly seen me, or had I always been a placeholder, a role to fill in their self-written script? I paused under a flickering street lamp, staring at the slick pavement. In the quiet hum of the city, I almost missed it. Another buzz from my phone. A text this time. "Family comes first. Always." The words glowed against the screen, their intent clear. Guilt, expectation, control. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the automatic pull of obligation. I felt something else, something stronger. Maybe, for once, it's time I came first. The coffee shop smelled like burnt beans and old wood, a familiar comfort that made it easier to sit across from Marla, an old friend I hadn't seen since I left. We traded the usual small talk, jobs, the weather, the creeping gentrification of our favorite corners of Portland, until, without malice, she said it. I ran into your mom a few weeks ago at the Johnson's garden party. She looked fabulous. You should have seen the spread. Live music, champagne fountains. It was like something out of a movie. I smiled tightly, the kind of smile you give when the earth shifts under your feet, but you're too proud to fall. Parties, champagne, garden soirees. Not hardship. Not the desperate family crises I was being summoned home to mend. Marla didn't notice my silence. She sipped her latte and moved on, but her words clung to me like a second skin. I wandered the city after we parted, letting my feet choose the direction because my mind was elsewhere, spinning. The lies were bigger than I thought. Not just about needing me, not just about missing me. They didn't need me at all. They needed my presence as a prop, a bandage to cover the gaping hole of their fractured image. I found myself standing in front of the old university where I'd graduated 3 years ago. Students milled about in caps and gowns, laughing, arms around each other, their families beaming behind their phones. I remembered sending out my graduation announcement, full of hope, imagining a moment where my family might finally see me, not as a burden, not as an afterthought, but as something to be proud of. No one came, no call, no card, no text. The day I crossed that stage, I wore a smile wide enough to hide the hollow. I sat alone afterward at a diner down the street, eating a slice of pie that tasted like paper, watching other graduates unwrap gifts and pose for family photos. Some things are so painful you don't even cry about them. You just fold them neatly and pack them away, layer after layer, until you forget they're there, until something like Marla's careless words rips the seams open again. I moved away from the campus, the memories trailing behind me like torn paper. At a crosswalk, my phone buzzed. Brenda. Again. I let it vibrate in my hand until it stopped, a phantom pulse echoing in my chest. Then, for the first time, I declined the call without a second thought. Staring up at the soft, bruised sky, I whispered under my breath, barely louder than the whispering leaves. They chose their absence long before I chose mine. I found out by accident. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years tagged me in a Facebook photo from a charity event back home. There, standing center stage, was Brenda, my mother, regaling the crowd with stories of her brilliant daughter who had graduated early and built a dazzling career, thanks to her family's unwavering support. I stared at the screen, blinking hard. There was no mention of the nights I spent eating dollar store ramen, the jobs I juggled, the crushing loneliness that gnawed at me in the spaces where their support should have been. In her version of the story, I was their shining achievement, proof of their good parenting, their sacrifice. I was a trophy polished and placed in the living room of their reputation. Humiliation burned slow and steady in my chest. Not the kind that made you cry, no, the kind that calcified into something colder, heavier. I closed the app and tossed my phone onto the couch. But the bitter taste lingered. A few days later, at a family barbecue I almost skipped, one of my uncles, already a few beers deep, slapped me on the back and said, "Heard your name's still on the house deed. Smart move, Caril. Family's gotta stick together these days, huh?" I froze, beer halfway to my lips. I hadn't thought about the house in years. It was supposed to stay in the family, sure, but no one had ever mentioned anything about me being legally tied to it still, especially not with the kind of liabilities they were juggling now. That night, long after the laughter and smoke cleared, I sat at my desk and dug. Emails, bank statements, county property records. And there it was, my signature on papers I barely remembered signing, giving Brenda and Orville the authority to mortgage the property, without ever needing my permission again. They hadn't just stolen my voice. They had quietly taken whatever security I thought I had left tethering me to that house, to that name. I sat there for a long time, staring at the glowing screen, feeling nothing and everything all at once. I could storm over, shout, demand explanations, but somewhere deep inside, a steadier voice rose up. Not this time. This time, I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me break open like a cracked jar spilling old grief across their feet. No, this time would be different. I spent the next hours methodically saving files, taking screenshots, sending copies to a private backup drive. I moved slow, deliberate. When the last file was safely tucked away, I printed the documents and placed them carefully into a plain brown folder. I locked it in my desk drawer with a soft click, standing in the darkened room lit only by the street lamp outside. They had written me off as a pawn. They forgot what happens when pawns reach the end of the board. The documents spread across my desk like a deck of cursed cards, each signature a thread unraveling everything I had tried to preserve. I traced my name, printed neatly at the bottom of forms I barely remembered signing, and felt the air thicken around me. Mortgage agreements, loan authorizations, liens. My parents hadn't just borrowed against the family home, they had borrowed against me. My inheritance, my safety net, had been quietly drained to prop up the crumbling facade they had built. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, feeling the numb disbelief congeal into something heavier. There wasn't even anger yet, just an eerie, frozen stillness inside my chest. I could almost hear Brenda's voice in my head, sweet and sharp. "It's not personal, honey, it's just family. Family." A hollow word now, brittle as dry leaves. Later that afternoon, the real storm hit. News spread across social media, whispers at first, then a deluge. Dorian's fiancé had vanished, gone without a trace, taking with her not just the engagement gifts but a significant portion of the family's money, siphoned off through shell accounts and false investments that nobody had bothered to question because appearances mattered more than prudence. The local paper ran a small piece, a tragic betrayal at the hands of a trusted future daughter-in-law. I didn't feel triumphant. There was no satisfaction, only a cold, hollow ache, the kind that comes when something rotten finally collapses under its own weight. I sat alone in my apartment that night, the rain smearing the city lights into blurry halos on the window pane. Portland was quiet except for the occasional whoosh of a passing car, the distant bark of a dog. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I simply sat there, breathing in the silence, feeling the last strands of loyalty snap loose, one by one. There was no family left to salvage, there was only me now, and that was enough. I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and started writing, a formal letter, careful, precise, laying out every illegal move, every documented betrayal, no threats, no ultimatums, just facts, lined up neatly like bricks building a wall they would never climb over again. When I finished, I signed it with a steady hand. I folded the letter, placed it into an envelope, and sealed it with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any shouted argument ever could. Standing by my window, I whispered to the night, to myself, to the girl I had been and the woman I was becoming. This time it's my move. The envelope sat heavy in my mailbox, thicker than usual, its crisp white too sharp against the faded paint. My name printed neatly on the front. Inside, a formal letter from a law firm, cold, professional, claiming that I was partially responsible for Dorian's outstanding debts because my name had once been associated with the house he leveraged to finance his failed dreams. I stood there on my porch, letter trembling slightly between my fingers, the Portland rain soaking through the paper like the betrayal soaking through my bones. When I called Brenda, she answered on the first ring, her voice sugary sweet and dripping with something far uglier underneath. "It's not a big deal, sweetheart," she cooed. "You have so much now. You're successful. You owe it to the family." Owe it, as if every sleepless night, every missed meal, every silent birthday hadn't already been a payment extracted with interest. I hung up without another word. A few days later, another bombshell dropped. Dorian's wedding was still happening. Not just happening, it was ballooning into a full-blown spectacle. A family friend sent me a scanned copy of the wedding program, gushing about how proud my parents must be. There it was, my name, neatly printed under special guests of honor, implying my full support for the circus they had built on top of lies and crumbling foundations. They hadn't even asked me. They assumed my presence, my complicity, my silence. The rage that bloomed inside me wasn't loud or violent. It was slow, a fire burning steady and hot in the marrow of my bones. I dialed Brenda again. When she answered, I didn't wait for pleasantries. "I'm not coming," I said. "I'm not reading your speech. I'm not standing by and pretending anymore. If you push me, if you force my name into this farce, I will go public. Every document, every lie, every theft, you'll watch it all unravel." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, so thick it almost crackled through the speaker. "You would destroy us," she whispered, a soft venom coating every syllable. "No," I said, my voice steady, "you already did that yourselves." I hung up before she could twist the blade further. That night, as I sat by my window with a cup of tea cooling in my hands, the phone buzzed again. A voicemail, Brenda's voice low and almost feral. If you destroy us, you destroy yourself too. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing but a calm certainty settle deep into my chest. That's the difference between us. I'm ready to survive it. The email arrived without warning, as if daring me to believe the absurdity of it. A formal, polished message from Brenda herself, copying half the extended family and a handful of Dorian's future in-laws. It outlined my honored role at the upcoming wedding, the speech I was apparently scheduled to deliver, the one celebrating family unity and sacrifice. I reread it 3 times, bile rising higher each time. They had not asked. They had decided. My refusal, swift and sharp, cracked the fragile veneer they had tried so hard to keep polished. Within hours, Brenda called, voice thick with accusation. "You're tearing this family apart, Caril," she hissed. "You always have." Orville added his own layer of bitterness later that evening, in a message dripping with disappointment. "We counted on you. You're supposed to be the good example." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Their farce was unraveling, and they needed a scapegoat. They needed me. When the guilt tactics didn't work, they switched to desperation. Brenda's voice trembled during our next call, weaving a shaky tale of hospital visits and grave diagnoses. She spoke of specialists, of late-night emergencies, her words stacked carefully to pull at strings that had long since frayed. "Come home," she whispered, "before it's too late." I closed my eyes and let the silence stretch between us, measured and deliberate. The next morning, skepticism driving me more than hope, I called Mrs. Reynolds, the neighbor who had known me since I was a child. She chuckled lightly when I asked about Brenda's condition. "Sick? Oh, honey, she's been running all over town planning that wedding. Just saw her yesterday picking up party favors." The world sharpened into brutal clarity. I showed up unannounced later that week, standing across the street from the old house, watching Brenda bustle around the yard with a clipboard and a cell phone, barking orders like a general marshalling her troops. Perfectly healthy, perfectly capable, perfectly willing to lie to her own daughter. When I confronted her, she didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Instead, she turned the weapon back on me. "You're heartless," she spat. "You always have been. You don't care about family, you only care about yourself." Each word, each accusation slid off me like rain off a waxed jacket. There was no victory in that moment, only grief, for what had been lost, for what had never truly existed. I stood outside the house a while longer after that, the place that once held so many dreams now sagging with rot and resentment. The windows were cracked, the paint peeling, the garden overrun with weeds. It was a tomb, and I was ready to leave it behind. "They lost me long before I ever walked away," I whispered into the soft evening air. Without a glance backward, I turned and walked away, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows that I no longer belonged to. The walls of my new apartment were still mostly bare, but they breathed. Not with echoes of old arguments or hollow promises, but with something lighter, cleaner. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching on the glass vases I had thrifted, the mismatched chairs around the tiny kitchen table, the books stacked precariously beside my bed. Each piece had been chosen by me. Each corner of this life was a declaration that I existed outside of anyone else's expectations. I placed the last photo frame on my desk, a picture of Portland's skyline at dusk, purple and gold bleeding into each other like a promise. No family portraits, no shadows lurking from the past. I set up my workspace slowly, deliberately, files organized, laptop humming, a small pot of lavender on the corner just because it made me smile. I made coffee the way I liked it, strong, a little bitter, and sat back, letting the moment settle around me, not surviving anymore, living. A week passed, then another. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, a postcard slipped through the mail slot. No envelope, no fanfare. A picture of a lighthouse, standing alone against a bruised sky. On the back, a short message in Brenda's careful handwriting. "We miss you. No apology, no explanation, just 3 words dangling like bait in the emptiness between us." I turned the card over in my hands, feeling the ache bloom and recede like a slow tide. It would have gutted me once. It would have sent me scrambling, desperate to patch a ship that had already sunk. Now, it just felt like something left behind at a place I'd moved away from. I tucked the postcard inside an old novel I no longer read, sliding it onto the shelf with a soft finality. Outside, the city hummed, alive with the newness of spring. I grabbed my jacket and stepped into the street, letting the crisp air bite gently at my skin. Around me, life moved forward, strangers laughing at sidewalk cafes, the rumble of passing streetcars, the scent of fresh bread wafting from the bakery down the block. No one here cared who I had been, only who I was becoming. I walked, blending into the rhythm of a city that never once asked me to shrink. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt weightless. Not because the past had disappeared, but because I had finally laid it down. Not every goodbye needs to be bitter. Some just need to be final. Looking back, I realized that sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the greatest act of strength. Choosing yourself, even when it means standing alone, is never selfish. It's survival. We are not obligated to carry the weight of broken promises or live inside the stories others write for us. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stop showing up where love isn't given freely. What about you? Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? I would love to hear your story. Drop a 1 inch in the comments if this video resonated with you, or share where you're watching from. And if you didn't vibe with this story, let me know why. I genuinely value your thoughts. If this message touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories like this. Stories that remind us all. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply choose to begin again.